This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. You're ready to move your business forward, but first, you need to find the right team. Start your search with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It can help you reach qualified candidates fast, ensuring your listing is the first one they see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. See the results for yourself. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, professional speaker, wearer of many hats, not the least of which is hosting this podcast with my dear friend and colleague, the Shaggy to my Scooby-Doo, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, everybody. Great as always to be here. I do love that I get to be Shaggy and you get to be Scooby-Doo.
I don't know, Jake.
I can't do the voice, but I'm here for Shaggy. And also, again, another Matthew Lillard call out.
He's our dream podcast guest. I mean, it's just we're going to keep putting this out in the universe. And as soon as I help people, we'll call our people. Jake, do we have people?
That's how we know.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, I could count as a people. You could count as a people.
That's a little Russian nesting doll for me. I don't know. So I'm going to introduce today's guest with a little bit of a story. So when I was in grad school to get my PsyD in clinical psychology, my fourth year, I was looking for an elective to take, and there was one on suicidology with the great Dr. Phil Rutter, who's still a mentor and colleague of mine. So I asked him, I was like, well, why is this class an elective? Like, shouldn't we as future mental health professionals know how to deal with this? He's like, we used to try to make it a required class. Nobody would take it. They always tried to get out of it. So I said, well, that makes me want to lean into it, right? I do a lot of work with suicidal clients, and it's not only it's an important part of my job, but I think it's a conversation we all need to have. So I reached out to my friends at the JED Foundation, and they put me in touch with the fabulous Dr. Katie Hurley. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I sort of gave my run up to this, to how I got involved in this work. How do you end up sitting in this chair?
Well, how many hours do you have? That's a long story. So
we already said we'd have you back in March. So,
Okay, I'll get started. How did I get started? Well, I can tell you that in high school, I declared that I wanted to be a therapist and work with kids and teenagers specifically. And my parents, this was, the late 1900s, as the young people like to say, late 1900s. And my parents' response was kind of like, you should be a nurse, or like, what's a therapist, right? It was kind of like we weren't there yet. People were not really, therapists existed, psychologists existed, but it wasn't part of the norm yet. And so I went to Boston College, studied psychology, loved it, became very close with a professor, Dr. Norman Berkowitz. And I sat down with him my senior year and said, what should I do to do this? This is what I want to do. How do I get there? And he said, you should go to get your MSW right away. that's the most versatile degree. This is the place for you to start. You can do all kinds, you can do research, you can do clinical work, you can do, public health work, you can do all kinds of stuff if you have that degree. So off I went to Penn, got the degree, would later go back and get my doctorate. But it was a passion for helping kids. And part of that came from struggling myself in high school with my own anxiety and depression, which I didn't know what those things were in 1992, 93. Having friends that were struggling. One of my best friends of all time, would find out much later that she had ADHD. And that was what contributed to anxiety and depression and making it really hard for her to learn. And so, we were just like winging it in the 90s, really. I mean, so we were just kind of all getting by and figuring out our own strategies. My little sister, who was not diagnosed till much later with ADHD, would say, she just made stuff up. It was like she just had to figure out how to get through school and life and doing stuff. And so that's kind of what my starting point was. And then spent many years working in schools as a school-based clinician, and then leadership, as a clinical director, and then was in private practice. I write a lot of books, as you two know. So my focus on the JED Foundation and really, really like honing in on suicide prevention comes from a lot of places. It's 28 years of clinical practice and seeing kids really still struggle and not having enough resources. But when I was 23, my father died by suicide. And at that time, 1998, men did not at all talk about mental health and still kind of don't. But then definitely not. There was no way for him to talk about what he was going through, not with peers, not with my mom, not with family. So he was lonely, pervasively lonely. And I kind of made a pact with myself that at some point I was going to really address this on a larger scale. And that's why I landed here at JED.
I mean, we are fond of this on this podcast of saying all research is me search, right? Like we get into it because we are trying to create a world that we needed as kids, right? And if we get to give that for the generation following us, then we're putting some good in the world. And also, I was this close to going to Boston College, which was like, Boston College, what? So you do this work and you're touched by suicide in a very real, personal way. And looking at the world now, what things do you see have changed and what things are unfortunately still the same?
Well, that's a super complex question because one, the research comes out like every time you turn around and you have it all memorized, there's a new report, especially with young people, right? So, the latest, are we seeing some slight decreases in, depression among young people? Sure. But we're also seeing pretty steady rates of suicide among young people of specific populations like Black and Brown boys and LGBTQIA plus youth. And so, it's premature to, just throw the parade and say everything's starting to fall into place, everything's working. But I think it is good to look at it and say, well, that fewer young people are identifying as depressed right now is a really good sign. We're living in precarious times. Different people are affected in different ways. We have a 24-hour news cycle that's absolutely everywhere and hard to decipher at times. And that puts a lot of pressure on young people. So I think there are positives and negatives, like always. And we just continue to do the work. We continue to show up on campuses, in community-based organizations, in Greek life organizations. We just continue to show up where young people are so that we can provide that comprehensive support and help them work through these difficult things.
And just to highlight that Greek life thing for a second, I mean, I went to Wake Forest University undergrad and I was in a frat, and I have a distinct memory of one of the brothers in the fraternity, like really struggling. And we'd be like, come downstairs to the party, bro. Like that'll fix it. A lot of light beer and terrible music will save the day. And like, it wasn't until really like I dragged him out of his room, we went for a long walk, that he opened up to me about like all the things he was carrying. And obviously I'm being very general to protect his confidentiality, but it's one of those things like I love that you'd go to the place where those conversations need to be had. I mean, is that a sort of I can't imagine at the JED Foundation you guys have a typical giant air quotes day ever, but is that that's what I understand to be consistent with your guys' mission. Is that true?
Yes. So, our overall mission is to reduce suicide and protect the mental health of young people. We originally were ages 13 to 30, and now we're also in K through 12 districts. So we're kind of K through 30 at this point. We have our school mental health specialists who are on the ground in schools. I work closely with Dr. Kurt Michael, who is our suicidologist and runs our postvention program. For those who don't know what postvention is, it's the response after an event of a loss by suicide or some other traumatic, tragic, loss that was not anticipated. So we are often on the ground in schools or in municipalities, cities, try to help people recover from these kinds of events. So JED does a lot of different work, and I oversee the programs with community-based organizations and Greek letter organizations. But we also have our campus program for colleges. We've got the K to 12 district program. We have high schools. We have a separate program for independent and boarding schools. So we just kind of run the gamut of getting into these spaces and, training faculty, teachers, coaches. We're working closely with the NCAA on helping their coaches and athletes know how to recognize signs of distress, which is a huge need right now. We've worked with the Big 12 counseling centers to help with coaches and athletes. We have a training for them. So wherever we're called, we show up. I've been doing work closely with Music Cares, which is a foundation that helps musicians with all kinds of things, mental health, getting insurance benefits, finding doctors, finding therapists to see. So they have a whole umbrella of services that they provide to the musical community. That's been meaningful to me because my husband is part of the musical community. So we do a lot of different stuff. And it's kind of incredible, actually. I mean, yes, the short answer, I guess, to your question is that, yes, every day someone from JED is somewhere helping someone.
And let's highlight that. Let's amplify that, because this isn't a somebody else's problem. This isn't a somewhere else's problem. It's every community. It's every school. Personally, I loved when you said independent schools and boarding schools, because there are a lot of parents who are like, "This, I can't handle this kid. Send them to boarding school," where it's like, you get in feelings of rejection, feelings of isolation, and then you have a kid who has now more time on their hands, and that can be very problematic very quickly. So understanding how to adapt the messaging and support and resources for those hyper specific communities. I mean, not to sound melodramatic, but that literally could save a life.
It really can. Yeah, it can. And it does, I think. It's important work. And sometimes people also think that the boarding schools and the prep schools. I mean, I was a prep school kid in Connecticut. I went to an independent day school, but sometimes people look at those communities and say, oh, they have it all. They're fine. And we find that they're actually not fine and that there are different pressures. And so we're trying to really reach everybody.
We are very fond here of saying that, we don't play the misery Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, Connecticut's such an interesting place because I have family from Darien, one of the most affluent communities in the United States, right?
Yeah.
But 10 minutes up 95 is Bridgeport.
Yeah.
Just because you're from a place doesn't mean you don't have pressures, you don't have it hard. And the more we get out of that mindset of, well, other people have it worse, well, sure, right? There are also lots of people who have it better. And all we can do is deal with the things you're facing, not the other way around.
Yeah, I always say that too. It's when people want to help other people, they tend to say things like that. Like, well, it could be worse. You could have this problem over here. And it's like, that's not helpful. Everybody's allowed to have their own struggles and reach out for help. And the more that we're, empathic in those kinds of situations and can help people situationally, the less the stigma around asking for help.
Now, Jake, I see you chomping at the bit. I think you want to ask a question on Music Cares with all of the instruments.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily Music Cares. I'm more curious right now about from a teacher's perspective, because I've taught everything from kindergarten all the way through college, and I can only imagine the conversations and the way that it's happening when JED as an organization is in a kindergarten class versus 30-year-olds. So I'm curious, What does that look like for the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade? Because you were mentioning specifically starting with 13-year-olds as the youngest and then expanding to those even younger groups.
So our district mental health initiative, we are doing in collaboration with the Superintendents Association of America. That is more of an upstream project that we're doing with them. So we're not actually like, I don't go into kindergarten classrooms, although I would, I would love to go in and talk with kindergartners about feelings. They're the best at talking about feelings, actually. So in those situations, in the district program, we're really working to build out strategic planning for accounting for the mental health of everybody from kindergarten through 12th grade. So if a school is seeing that their elementary schoolers are really struggling to connect, they're having trouble with social interactions, they're seeing some loneliness, or seeing kids kind of spreading out and not connecting during recess and things like that, we would help guide them toward an age appropriate program that they could either fold into their curriculum. But we would also train every teacher in that school to recognize signs of distress, to know how to talk at an age appropriate level to each student about their mental health, and how to kind of keep eyes on them so that they can better understand what's happening and know when they need to elevate to professional help versus helping in the classroom.
I love that. That reminds me of like when Dr. Matt and I were at the same school and he was running, I forget what it's called. I want to say it was like second step. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was amazing to watch these like younger kids who were like struggling on the recess yard or whatever. And they were getting to like really petty arguments here and there, but not being able to articulate so much about what they were thinking and what they were feeling. And then go into a class like that with Dr. Matt. And then right afterwards, these kids are like, everything's great. We're all so positive and we're friends. And I love talking about feelings and like the difference. So like, I just think it's phenomenal that you guys are able to like bring those aspects to schools, especially for the kids who need it like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we find that it works, having a comprehensive approach, having a plan in place and knowing the steps to take. Also, just one thing that's honestly really important that you all probably know about, but not everybody thinks about, is just policy even. So what really is the mental health crisis intervention policy of the school? What are the bully prevention policies? What are the cyberbullying, policies? What do those look like? And does every teacher know them and know how to implement them? Do students know what they can do if there's a problem and who they can go to for help and how that happens? So really just streamlining processes at the top makes a huge difference in making sure that kids feel like they can get to the right person when they're in need.
And I think the policy piece of this is so important because a lot of the people we work with, right, Dr. Katie, you and I are mental health professionals, right? We are trained in this. We have ethical guidelines. We have to do CEs. It's a whole thing. But what I find is that when people don't have the training that we have, they default to like, what did someone say to me?
Yeah. Right.
And we know how less mentally health informed the previous generations were. That's not their fault. But if, kid A is talking to, gym teacher B, and it's like, I'm feeling kind of down, like, well, you got to just tough that out, son. And because it's not coming from a place of ill intent, but it's like, you say the things you know.
Yep.
I was a much better parent before I had children because you just stuff, right?
Yeah.
It'll come for you someday, Jake.
Maybe.
We'll talk to Jack about that. But that's having those policies so teachers have a place to turn to get the things to say so they're not having to make it up as they go. Because I always say to teachers, I don't need you to know this stuff. My job is to know this stuff and to give this stuff to you. Right. And I feel like when you say that, you feel the anxiety in the room go down.
Yes.
We don't need them all to go back to school and get master's in counseling degrees.
No.
It would be great if they did, I guess, but that's not efficient.
But they're on the front lines.
They are.
And often unprepared because they're not being prepared by their schools. There's only so much we can expect, but also teachers and coaches are first stops for kids a lot of the time.
Yeah. For the kind of high achieving kids that I think you and I see, and certainly that you've written about, like they spend more time with their teachers, coaches, directors
Yep.
than they do with their own parents, right? And you come home, you drop the soccer bag off, you have a little dinner, the kid disappears upstairs to do homework. Good night, sweetie. Good night, mom. I mean, even the time you have is not really interactive in that way.
Are you spying on me, Dr. Matt? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, how do you prepare for a podcast?
Yeah.
That got weird.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I have a 16-year-old son and he's a basketball player. So, he comes home from school. He likes to get his work done first. So he's right up in his room, do all the work. Then he disappears. I mean, half the time he doesn't even say goodbye or, coming and going, hops in the car, goes to practice for 2 hours, eventually shows up for dinner. So yeah, that's about the teen years in a nutshell, especially if you have kind of a busy kid.
So many of the kids we specialize with here at the Neurodiversity Collective are, the gifted and talented kids. So, let's talk about the basketball players, the musicians, right? That, because to the extent to which the educational system does okay by these kids, they're much more comfortable with, oh, you're really good at science? Do more science.
Yeah.
What supports exist for the kid who's a brilliant musician like Jake or a great basketball player like your son? How are you tapping in to support those kids?
I mean, so when we look at a school, we start every contact with what we call a baseline assessment. So we're looking for strengths and we're looking for gaps. And I can tell you from personal experience, having a son he's a basketball player, but he's primarily a nerd. He's very, very smart. So he's, yeah. And so he put himself into 4 AP classes, I think, this year for junior year. Like he just kind of runs his own program and does his thing. And I can tell you, there's not a lot of supports. Those kids are like, oh, you're smart, so go be smart. Not that his teachers wouldn't help him if he asked. They absolutely would. They're lovely. But you got to really ask because they're looking for the ones who are struggling. So at JED, that's what we do. We start with a baseline assessment. We look for the strengths. We want to build on strengths. We want to work collaboratively with schools, but we also want to find the gaps. We want to plug some holes. And so, that is an area where we do talk about what about the gifted and talented kids? Oftentimes what I found is that gifted and talented in our district meant extra school. So I was like, forget it. We're not doing that. You're not staying 2 hours after school to be smart. You can come home and do fun stuff. So, really helping the school look at it and say, okay, what avenues of support do you have for these kids? And how do they get there? How do they know to get there? We're huge on put up QR codes everywhere. All the kids are using their phones. Put the QR codes absolutely everywhere to the pathways to help. Is there a clinician on staff who specializes in kids who are maybe a little higher academic and really self-motivated, but also perfectionists who are coming down on themselves at night and struggling with that sort of anxiety? Point them in that direction everywhere they go so that it's not hard for the athletes. Again, the QR code to either to the coach or to the person who can help support them in some way, because athletes tend to put a ton of pressure on themselves as well. Plus, they have other things they have to meet. They have to do their community service. They have to have a certain GPA. There's all kinds of pressures on kids. So we're big on putting systems into place that make it easy for kids to access help, but especially for those, neurodiverse kids who are, we're looking at what do you have? Do you have a peer counseling program? Do you have lunch groups where kids can just go in, and if they prefer to talk to teachers because that's easier, they can go in and talk to a counselor or a teacher or whoever? What are the systems in place? I have yet to meet a school that didn't have at least one teacher who opens their classroom door at lunchtime and lets in all the kids that want to be in. I mean, that exists everywhere. Formalizing it is great because then they don't have to search, right? There's no trial and error. They can know exactly where to go. So we just really look at things like that and try to find the best avenues of support for all the different needs in the school.
Jake, I know exactly that you were that teacher. So, I mean,
yeah, yeah, it was hard, but also fun, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because I loved it 100%, but the emotional aspect that it takes on you, the time investment, the lack of prep periods that the teachers get sometimes, it's definitely a lot. And I'm curious from your perspective, like how do you start to implement those kind of changes for schools and like point those kind of things out for them?
So we give them a report based on all of the assessments we do. So students are also assessed using the Healthy Mind Survey and then the adapted version for the high schools and middle schools. And we do focus groups with staff, sometimes with students if we can. We try to focus group as many people in the community as we can. And then we put it all together in a nice, pretty report. And we talk about here's where we think things are going really well. Here's where we want to help you build out some new systems. And so like I said, we work very collaboratively. We don't come in and pretend to know everything. And, we come in and say, here's what we see, but tell us more about it. And what do you think of this? We actually talk a lot to schools about preventing staff burnout. And so one of the reasons we sort of start at the top with trainings for staff and support for staff is because we know that some teachers are really burning out. Teachers need their prep periods. Teachers need to eat lunch. Teachers need to take those breaks during the day. And that's why I actually talk to schools a lot about like, let's formalize it. If you have 4 or 5 teachers that let kids in at lunch, do one a day. So let's rotate those teachers so that they can provide the support they want to provide, and they can also shut their door when they need to and have that break for themselves. And I think that's just formalizing things sometimes is a great first step for kind of helping schools sort out where they are and where they want to go.
Quick question from that is, what do some of those other supports look like that you like present to the schools, offer them, talk about with them?
Right. So we have a whole menu of workshops. And so, often we'll do creating cultures of care for staff. We will encourage administration to create more staff downtime, like, not filling every single pupil-free day with a bazillion trainings, but giving staff actual downtime to be in their rooms, to work with their other, colleagues if they want, or even to tap out early and, get to do something for themselves. We encourage administrations to bring in support for staff, like whether it's like bringing in yoga once a week or all sorts of different stuff, bringing in puppies for, pet therapy, like find the ways to support your staff. Because if your staff isn't feeling supported, they don't have the bandwidth to handle kids who are struggling with their mental health all the time. That's hyperbole, but who, on any given day, you're going to have one student in a class of 25 to 34 kids who's struggling with their mental health. So we really need to build up those systems for staff, but also just, formalizing a mental health strategic planning committee at the school. So that might include a teacher who's passionate about mental health. It's got to include somebody in the administration who can make the decisions, because we have the people who come up with the good decisions, but the people who have to make them. Creating more pathways from staff to district level if they have concerns or they want to make some changes. So really just, offering as much as possible. One school that I have personally done a lot of work with, one thing we did was they were providing therapy for staff at a certain place, but they had to go after school to this other place. And so it would be like a 30-minute drive from the school to there. And then it's Los Angeles, so they could live anywhere. It could be a long drive home. So instead of doing that, we brought in the therapists on Friday afternoons to the teachers, and those who wanted to use them could, again, use the QR code, sign up for a session, and have their private time to talk to somebody. That was something that was a huge help for that school because the teachers finally felt heard, and they didn't have to have that extra cognitive load of like, get in my car, drive all the way there. Some of them would start driving there and then just be like, no, forget it, I'm going home, I'm too tired. So reducing barriers is huge.
And this ties back into what you said about the QR codes. One of the schools that I work with here, in New Jersey, we put up mental health resources in QR codes, and I had them pull a report. What codes get clicked on the most? Dr. Katie, where would you guess the codes that get clicked on the most are located in the school?
Oh. Wow. So I would guess locker rooms, or like if there's a lunch room or like common areas like that.
Locker rooms, you got it in one. I mean, locker rooms, bathrooms, but like,
yep.
Because think about it. Who's the kid who wants to take their phone, walk across the lunchroom, snap the mental health,
yeah,
and then go back to their desk? But if you're in the stall and you can be like,
Yep.
absolutely, right?
Yeah,
Like the stigma may be decreasing, but it's not gone.
that's true.
And we've got to give kids reasonable cover. Like we're not going to stick our heads in the sand here, but we're also not going to pretend everything's fine. And when you're talking about, these systems, right? I think that I've always conceptualized suicide as a disorder of disconnection. Right? You feel disconnected from yourself, from your family, from your peers, right? And when you're neurodivergent, there are just not as many people like you.
Yeah.
The thing you are most noticed for becomes a thing that you are punished for or reprimanded for, becomes a source of disconnection. So if I'm ADHD and everyone yells at me for being ADHD, they're yelling at me for being me.
Yeah.
You can feel the hopelessness plug in there.
Mm-hmm.
When we're building those resources, I mean, how do you help people see those kids for their strengths? Because I love that you said it's a strengths-based assessment, right? Like, how do we turn up the dial on that?
We really believe in training, like train, train, train. And so really training teachers on different neurodiversities, how do you see, the superhero inside of the ADHD kid that can't sit still because it's in there, right? Likely that's the same kid that's actually connecting everybody and making jokes to break tension and having like really cool ideas, just because they heard one thing that the teacher said, and like maybe they're blurting it out and they didn't raise their hand, but that's because they got to get it out of their brain before it poof disappears. One thing I do on the side of all my work is I teach in the MSW program at Simmons University, and I teach a neurobiology for social work class. And I'm always astounded by how much people don't know about the human brain. And so really teaching teachers, what does a brain function like for a kid with ADHD or a kid with OCD or a kid with in the midst of a depressive episode, or anxiety, that giant umbrella that has so many things under it. So really offering, instead of the teacher support days being about like AI, which is important, but systems of grading and all that jazz, it's like, let's teach them useful information about how they can meet these kids where they are inside their own brains. Because, Dr. Matt, that's what you and I do every day when we're in clinical practice with young people, right? We find the pathways into the individual brain of the person sitting opposite us. And we can teach people how to do that. You don't have to have a PhD in psychology to learn that. I do it all the time when I speak at schools, So I think more of that for staff, for parents, and for all the staff inside of schools, because we know that kids tend to develop relationships with, paraprofessionals, with the people in the lunchroom, with the janitors, walking around campus, best friends, right? So really making sure everybody has that understanding.
Oh man, especially, oh my gosh, like especially for our bright and quirky kiddos.
Yep.
Like I have a kiddo I worked with for years, and we actually don't need this support anymore. But for many years, the safe person in school was the janitor. He would sit in the boiler room and help the janitor fix stuff.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's weird. I'm like, it's working for this kid though. He's making a connection. He feels seen. Tools are an area of comfort for him. I mean, it was bing, bang, boom. And like, for atypical kids, sometimes we need to have atypical looking solutions.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Because honestly, if suicide is a disorder of disconnection, any way of driving connection is good. But then I feel like, you mentioned cyberbullying before. Like, I think let's speak a little bit to like the online presence of all this, because
Yeah.
when we were kids, I mean, I was very, very much bullied in middle school. But when you went home, it was over because, like,
Yeah.
I mean, unless they were going to show up in your driveway and throw rocks at you, that was it. But now, I mean, we're plugged in 24/7, and all it takes is a fake Gmail account, and then here we go again. So, like, what do we put in for those nebulous gray spaces of like, it's online? Is it our problem?
Well, okay. So schools always ask that question, right? And the answer is yes, it's your problem, because in a perfect world, Kids are not using their devices at school, but we don't live in that world. Even the ones with the yonder pouches and, locking up the phones all day long, guess where they know how to hack into these systems to use cyberbullying? Their school issued device, whatever it is, Chromebook, iPad, whatever. They are smarter than us when it comes to technology. Like I'm not afraid to admit that. If I can't do something, my son can. And like, great. I'm so glad I have him. So we have to recognize that they are using every device they can get their hands on to do things. Also, I always say when we're talking about bullying and cyberbullying, because this is an area of my expertise, like, first of all, it's patterns of behavior. And, we want to be cautious not to call everybody a bully because they made one big error. Because raise your hand if you never made a giant error in your youth. No hands up, right? Jake only.
I'll put my hand down. I'm sorry.
Musicians do tend to be kind of perfect, actually, which is annoying. So,
Thank you.
especially the
I'm far
younger
from
ages.
perfect.
I just wait for your husband to like kick in the door and be like, yeah, right. Yeah. And then he's out.
Oh, but he was an angel. I mean, I only know the reports I get. But, people make mistakes, right? Their brains are not fully formed. They are, we're putting devices in their hands that can do all this stuff around the world with the touch of a button, and their frontal cortices are largely offline at the time, right? So they're not having the judgment and decision making that they need to be in charge of these devices all the time. Now that brings us to, should everybody ban phones? I actually don't think so, because for neurodiverse kids, for LGBTQIA kids, for other kids who are otherwise marginalized or lonely, those phones can provide very important connections. So what we need to do is really focus on building those communities of caring inside of schools. And so really having, not just a training. Schools tend to bring in, once a year, they'll bring in somebody who yells at them, barks at them about, don't give out your password. Somebody who comes in and says that they were a drug addict, tells their story, scares the bejesus out of them, and then they forget the next day. Sometimes somebody who comes in and talks about how they were bullied. But again, like, these one and done sort of assemblies can be useful, but they're also one and done. And so building that from the top down, right? Giving teachers the space and the tools to talk about things like cyberbullying, to stop class for a minute and say, wait a minute, I heard this thing happen. Let's talk about that. Let's break that down. Because what we're seeing right now with young people is that, and adults, I mean, I'm not going to focus on young people here because this is true across the board. Even when they're not using an anonymous account, people are saying some pretty awful things. We have been numbed to the fact that there's a human being on the other side of that comment. We have forgotten that across the board, across age groups. I see it with, people my age all the time on Facebook. It's like this cesspool of people barking out what they think, what they believe, and why they're mad at you. This is not conflict resolution, right? This is not healthy conversation. It's not relational. It severs attachments. It makes people feel othered and lonely and disconnected. So we've got to teach them how to do it. We have to bring back relational development and working through conflict. No one is teaching people how to solve a conflict anymore. So kids are in this weird space of like, if there's a conflict, they just ghost and run. It's like, well, that's over, new relationship. So unhealthy, not how the world works, especially like in a working environment, or, like, part of growing up is learning how to be an adult and how to manage with people who maybe don't share all your worldviews and moral values, right? But we work with them anyway, because we can, because people are people and it's good to learn from other folks. So I'm totally getting off track, but I think bringing that, education into the classroom daily is huge. But teachers are afraid to talk about these things because teachers are constantly under fire. And then they get the emails from the parents, or the emails bypass the teacher and go right to the administration and then come back to the teacher. And it's like they can't win for losing right now. No matter what they do, somebody's going to criticize. We didn't used to do that so much. So if parents could learn to step back and trust that teachers have the best interest of kids in mind. These are not people making $10 million in their lifetime, never mind a year. These are people making very little money who want to educate the next generation. I always say, nothing can be done in isolation. So we can come into a school and really help with those systems and processes and trainings and all that stuff to help build up communities of caring in schools so that we increase belonging, right? But the community's also got to be in there, like the surrounding community of the school plus the parents, grandparents, whoever else is involved. Like everybody's got to be on the same page if we really want to make a change.
So this actually is a perfect segue to a question I meant to ask earlier, and we were having such a great conversation I didn't get to it. Can you tell us a story of a time where you saw the work, and as amazing as your clinical work is, Dr. Katie, I'm going to focus on the JED Foundation for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a story about a time where you're like, you did something for the JED Foundation, you came and like, we made a difference here. We did a thing.
Yep.
That would, I think that would be
yeah.
useful.
Okay. I have mentioned that I've been working closely with a school in Los Angeles. I'm not going to name them because I don't name without asking permission first, but I will say that they are a high achieving school. They are a school that's been around a very long time, and they've had several losses by suicide. And I live in Los Angeles. And by the time that we were brought in, they were really struggling with what aren't we doing? Like, what do we do? How do we help these kids? The staff were just feeling awful. The students, of course, were traumatized, but the staff were equally as traumatized. Everybody felt like they were trying to connect, they were trying to help, and what was going wrong, and they couldn't kind of put their finger on it. And so Dr. Kurt Michael and I went in together and we said, let's pause on this right now, and let's just be okay with grieving to start. Like, let's just let it out and be okay with grieving. And then we really started to assess, and we talked to staff and we talked to students and we talked to administration, and we helped them come up with a comprehensive postvention plan. But we also went in, I mean, I think I probably did 3 or 4 trainings, both in person and virtually, to get as many parents and community members in as possible. We trained in how to recognize signs of distress. We trained in the cyberbullying, social media stuff. We trained in it's okay to say suicide. It's okay to talk about these things. And we really, at all levels, got people more comfortable with at least talking about it. And still students would say they're not doing enough. They're not doing enough. When we would sit with the students and say, tell us what you need. Tell us what you want. And what we kept hearing from students was like, yeah, we're all high achieving. And that's part of the problem because we're friends, but you can't be too close because Columbia's only going to take 4 of us. And we know that. So you're really, you're friends, but also you're against everybody that's next to you too. Like, you're competing. And so we really had to help this school figure out, how do you bring these kids together? Name that, stop pretending that doesn't exist, because they know it exists. They know exactly how many are going to get into each IV based on the previous years. And they know exactly who's applying where, and whose first choice is what. I mean, it's wild, that amount of pressure, but also the knowledge that they share. And so we really helped the school. Let's reconfigure how we do this and how we think about mental health in your school. And also there were some teachers that would kind of play into it. Like, well, I'm only going to give one of you an A. So good luck. It's like, how is that the first day of school? Really? That's real. That happens in some schools, in some classrooms. So, we brought all those things out in the open. We said, like, no more hiding. We're going to dig it all up, bring everything in the open, talk really openly. We would talk to the board. We talked to anybody who would listen. And we kind of got to this place of like, yeah, we rewrote our mission statement, but we don't actually live it. And so we want to live that mission statement. Part of that result of that, now again, this is a well-funded private school, but they're building out a new counseling center that's also just going to have like relaxation rooms and like study rooms and like places to hang out and connect where there's no pressure and kids can just hang, right? Like, they're trying to get the kids back to school more often on weekends for fun events and just like going to the games, and they're incentivizing like going to watch your friends play and all this different stuff just to like build community and help them connect outside of that classroom space, because they were finding they weren't really connecting, they were competing. So, I mean, it's work in progress, and we'll continue to refine and work, but I do feel proud of that work, watching that community go from grief and despair to like hope and connection over a period of a couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's also like it highlights something for me that I always despised hearing for teachers is like just teach the material and nothing else. That's all you're there for. Because like
Yeah.
you're highlighting such an important aspect of the community building and the fact that like a teacher can't just be there teaching about math, for instance, the whole time. Because sometimes there's going to be kids in there that are having a lot of issues or a lot of struggles that like they need that support there for. And to just be like, okay, cool, that's good for you, have fun, deal with it on your own, bye, I'm teaching you math. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really equate the same way, it doesn't work the same way. So like I'm just appreciative of the fact that you guys as an organization are highlighting this for schools especially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, and when we're done with the show, Dr. Katie, I'm going to ask you if, because I think I might know what school it is, because it occurs to me, well, we'll talk about that later. So we're going to start moving into wrapping up the podcast. And so we ask our 2 wrap-up questions, and then we're going to pass the mic to you to talk about a little bit, some words of wisdom for our audience. So Jake, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. I'm always so curious about what our guests are going to say for this, but what's your favorite word and why?
Okay. So I feel like I'm going to give a word and you're going to be like, that's so obvious. But I'm also going to say, like, this has been my favorite word forever. So my favorite word is empathy. And the reason that's my favorite word is not because it's a buzzword, but because I do believe it's the secret sauce to helping people learn how to connect and to decreasing division among people.
Perfect explanation too. 100% on board with that.
Yeah. I mean, how could anybody throw shade at that answer? All right. My question's a little different. If you could have one superhero on speed dial, who would it be and why?
Okay. And my answer is a little different because I don't know if you're going to know this particular superhero. My superhero that I would have on speed dial is Word Girl.
We love Word Girl.
You do? Okay, great.
Oh
Not
my
everyone
gosh.
is, like, I'm such a fan. But, she's a 5th grade superhero who gets called in to solve crimes and defeat the outlaw with words and conversation. And isn't that what we want people to do? To work through conflict with words and conversation?
And, and narrated by the incredible Chris Parnell. I love watching it with my kids because they're like, "Oh, this is awesome." And I was like, "Hee hee, that was a silly adult joke." I saw that, right?
Yep.
Oh man, word up, it's Word Girl. Jake, that is definitely our first Word Girl, right?
It definitely is, yeah. Here for it.
Yay.
Oh my God. So Dr. Katie, you are a delight. You're doing amazing work in all the different things you do. What would you want our audience to take home as a message?
Talk openly about mental health. I am fond of saying if we swapped out how are you for how's your mental health, we'd all be a little bit better for it because we would pause instead of giving the usual good, fine, and moving on. We might actually pause and talk about how we're really doing. So that's one thing. Talk to strangers. I think we're so busy and we're moving around so quickly in the world, and we're so afraid of like not knowing people for some reason these days. I talk to every older person that I encounter in a pharmacy or, grocery store, listen to people's stories, get to know people. That's how we build strong communities, is by connecting and talking to strangers. And it is indeed okay to say suicide. If you are worried that somebody is struggling with their mental health, the best thing you can do is say, are you thinking about suicide? And then you can figure out where to go from there to help someone. But anybody, we say at JED, anybody can help anybody. We know that a suicidal crisis typically lasts between 15 and 45 minutes. In like 15 minutes, you can help save a life just by being able to talk openly about mental health and suicide. So get into the habit. I often tell people to look themselves in the mirror and just say it over and over and over and over again until it rolls off their tongue. It will. Just practice.
What a perfect way to wrap this up is that same class that we took in suicidology in grad school. The thing that Dr. Rutter said in every single class is that you do not increase rates of suicide by saying the word suicide. And he's like, and every young clinician thinks that. Like, if I say, they hadn't thought of it, but then I said the word and now they are. He's like, trust me, they're already thinking of it. And I'm like, still to this day, when I'm having done this thousands of times now, it's like, okay, like, no, I can do it. But at the final for that class, we sat down and the only question on the paper was, does asking a kid about suicide increase their risk of suicide? And all we had to do is write the word no. And he's like, you all got an A in this class. Good job. Best final I've ever taken.
Amazing.
Right? And that stays in my head because that's, so for our listeners, like, you don't have to carry all of this burden on your own. There are trained professionals and amazing programs like the JED Foundation who will support this work. But anybody can ask that question. And it might be the question that turns the tide and saves a life.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here to do. And that's why we're so blessed to have you here with us, Dr. Katie. And I mean, really, the entire, like, to have a relationship with the JED Foundation in general is just personally and professionally, it's a real honor. So thank you.
Oh, for us as well. We love our connections. Thank you.
All right. Well, then I'm going to wrap up this episode. For all of us here at Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, thank you for being here with us, for learning with us and learning from us. And as always, for trusting us with your time. It means the world for us. Jake, you want to send us out?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening and for tuning in. I hope that you got a lot out of this as well, because I know that we all did. And Dr. Katie, thank you so much for being here. It was amazing to hear from you, talk with you, and just hear about all your experiences.
Thank you, Jake. Nice to meet you.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Take care, friends.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
Sometimes the hardest part is just starting. Dropbox Dash, new from Dropbox, reads the doc, scans the notes, checks the thread, and gives you the summary you were about to ask someone for. It writes the first draft in your tone with the context you forgot you needed. From idea to output, without the scramble. Learn more at Dropbox.com/dash.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.